Tonight, we return to the ruins of how a forgotten king changed Asia. Moonlight combs the towers of Angkor with silver fingers, and the jungle breathes like a sleeping beast around the stones. The paths are empty, yet the air holds a pressure, as if processions have only just passed and the dust has not decided to fall. He walks beneath faces carved into the sky, their smiles softened by rain, their eyes watching roads that no longer know where to go. Somewhere inside this horizon of stone lies the absence at the center of our tale, a king whose name slips from school books and conversations, yet whose will still sets shadows in motion. He's not merely missed, he is misremembered, stitched into other men's glory, or blamed for burdens he never carried. But granite keeps better notes than gossip. The galleries whisper of a hand that gathered cities, rivers, and men into a single breath, then exhaled it across half a world. Let the dust settle, the echoes rise, and the forgotten thrones speak once more. He moves through the gate where four serene faces gaze outward to the compass points. They do not speak, yet they name him without sound. This is the gate of a king who taught Angkor to smile even in stone, a king who returns in rain and rumor, a king whose story must be retrieved from lichen as carefully as a pearl from silt. Tonight, the city gives back fragments as he passes. A lamp-black thumbprint on a wall, the ghost of a drumbeat in the way water drips from a cornice, a sandal groove catching moonlight. A historical truth steadies the dream. In the late 12th century, after the Cham fleet stormed the waterways and the capital reeled, a ruler rose who rebuilt not only temples, but the arithmetic of mercy. He raised Angkor Thom as a new heart, crowned it with the Bayon, and ordered a lattice of hospitals and rest houses that stitched the empire's roads together. Inscriptions speak of a sovereign who counted compassion as policy, who seeded the land with places where a traveler could be treated as a citizen of the king's concern. The stones that survive, thresholds, lintels, sanctuaries, are receipts for promises kept. Yet the jungle keeps a second ledger, written in stories older than granite. In the villages that hang like necklaces along the forest's hem, elders tell that the king was not chosen by blood alone, but by water. As a child, they say, he was led to an elephant pool at dawn. The beast lowered its trunk and touched his brow. The surface broke into rings that stood, uncollapsing, for a count of 9 breaths. Fish rose and circled him in the shape of a wheel. The court astrologer wept, and the pond, according to the tale, reflected not the sky, but a mountain no one present had visited. The omen told him 3 things. Your road is long, your rain will hurt, and the gods expect to be fed with more than incense. He walked away from the pool with a private thunder under his ribs, and, the story says, never doubted his feet again. The mystery that troubles scholars keeps pace like a second shadow. Who, exactly, is the face upon these towers? Bodhisattva or sovereign, compassion or kingship multiplied to surveil and save? Why does one inscription praise a particular hand, while another carves carefully around the name, as if swallowing the syllable before it can be spoken? Did he seize a crown or answer a summons none else could hear? Even the dates quarrel. Chronicles compiled elsewhere overlap poorly with the city's own memory. Between those misfit calendars stands a man the stones insist upon, and the papers try to blur. He pauses at the terrace of the elephants, where parades once poured like sunlight. In the scraped silence, he hears what pageantry cannot hide, the weight of choices that cannot be rehearsed. The king of this tale is not a statue with a good biography. He is the hinge between catastrophe and order, a man who wakes to the smell of burned granaries and rewrites the sentence of a people with causeways and canals. He fights, yes, the reliefs keep their bows strung, but he also builds for the long hour after victory, when parades are over and rice must become certainty again. The fringe belief turns inside out what history lines up. Some say he bargained with the Naga princess beneath Angkor's moats. In exchange for the right to draw the land tighter with roads and dikes, he promised to feed her city of spirits once each month with boats of white flowers and cups of milk. If the offering was late, the princess tugged at the roots beneath the walls, reminding the living who kept the balance true. Others whisper that the king held counsel not only with ministers, but with the apsaras carved into the galleries, that he walked alone by torchlight and asked the dancers whether the harvest would stomach another decree. Stone answered with silence, and from that silence he learned to distribute kindness like sandbags before a storm. He turns a corner and enters a cloister where the night breathes more slowly. The broken smile of a guardian watches him with a chipped serenity that feels earned, not naive. He imagines the moment our king first stood here after the city's wounding, a man not yet crowned by anything except the lack of anyone better. He would have seen what we see, the stubborn endurance of carved stone and the sickly absence of ordered footfall. A lesser soul would have built a smaller dream. This one raised faces that looked in all directions at once and ordered roads to carry the gaze. Debate follows like a polite dog, never leaving, never quite obeying. Was the king a devout Mahayana Buddhist who softened the god-king's thunder into the hand mudra of compassion, or a ruthless politician who dressed policy in prayer? Did the hospitals heal bodies because he loved mercy, or because he understood that healthy villagers plant and harvest more predictably than grieving ones? Those who prefer saints choose one answer. Those who understand power choose the other. The stones shrug and keep both true. He passes a small shrine, still tended, a clay dish with 3 sticks of resinous incense, a yellow flower stubbornly bright in the dark. Someone here remembers without knowing they are remembering whom. That is the nature of forgotten kings. Their names fade, their fingerprints remain. A bridge that does not fall in flood speaks a syllable. A rest house lintel smooth as a mother's palm speaks another. A smiling tower that refuses to show anger speaks a third. Pronounce them together, and you hear a life. The moon slips behind a cloud. For one moment, the city is only breath and black. He hears elephants as thunder long gone, hears drums as the drip of roof water, the mind's habit of adding back what time has taken. Then the light returns, and with it the knowledge that forgetting is not the same as erasure. It is only a slower way of keeping. The king who changed Asia does not need a statue in every market to continue his work. He lives in the curve of causeways still walked, in the expectation that a ruler will keep the river polite, in the idea that a road should bring you not only to market, but to medicine. He stands at the gate once more. The 4 faces watch the night the way a father watches a sleeping child, ready without being afraid. He understands that to tell this story is to pick up a thread the jungle has been holding for centuries, and to promise to carry it carefully through our own hands. The king, long missing from our sentences, is waiting with the patience of stone. Tonight, the city has agreed to remember him aloud. The boy who will become the forgotten king first opens his eyes in a chamber of half-light and whispered caution. The palace is a maze of shadowed corridors, its air thick with the incense of rival prayers. He is not born into a crowned certainty. The court speaks of him as a branch from a contested trunk, a prince whose bloodline twists through multiple claims. His mother's gaze carries both tenderness and calculation, for in Angkor's high halls, love is often a ledger. Outside, the empire is a wounded animal, rivers choked with silt, provinces restless, and whispers of foreign ships threading through coastal waters. A historical fact anchors the dream. In the late 12th century, succession crises were no stranger to the Khmer court. The throne often shifted violently, seized by those strong enough to grasp it or subtle enough to bend the court to their will. Power was as much about who stood beside you in the audience hall as who scribed your name into the royal chronicles. In the court's gardens, where banyan roots twist like serpents in meditation, the boy is told an older story. Servants, emboldened by the absence of ministers, whisper that his birth coincided with an eclipse, a sign that one cycle had ended and another waited to begin. One nurse claims to have seen a white deer step across the lotus pond that night, its hooves silent, its reflection brighter than the moon. The deer, she insists, was not a creature of the forest, but a messenger from Preah Ko, the sacred bull of Shiva, come to guide a child who would walk between gods and men. The mystery that wraps his childhood is not whether he will be educated. He will in every art and stratagem a prince must learn, but whether the palace intends to prepare him for rule or for exile. He is tutored in languages beyond Khmer, Sanskrit for prayers, Cham for diplomacy, Chinese for tribute letters. He learns to handle a spear in the parade ground's morning mist, yet is also schooled in the weight of a plow, for a ruler who does not understand the rhythm of planting cannot claim to understand his people. The corridors of power teach harsher lessons. The boy learns which courtiers' smiles are knives folded in silk, which gifts are heavy with obligation. He overhears arguments through latticework screens, men debating alliances, the cost of war, whether his father's line is strong enough to keep the capital from splintering again. Each word sinks into him like ink into palm leaf, becoming part of the script that will one day guide his hand. One night, during the rains, he wakes to the sound of drums not meant for ceremony. From a high balcony, he sees torches moving quickly toward the eastern gate. The next morning, a minister's household is gone, vanished into the forest. No one explains, but he understands that in this palace, disappearance is as natural as coronation. The boy begins to walk the palace at hours when others sleep. He visits the old libraries, fingering scrolls that smell of dust and oil, tracing maps where roads spider out from Angkor into lands he has never seen. The royal astrologer catches him once and, instead of scolding, shows him a chart of stars that will matter in the year he turns 25. This, the old man says, tapping a cluster near the horizon, is when the gates open. Whether you walk through or are crushed beneath them will be your choice. By the time he is 12, he has learned to read more than texts. He can measure the mood of the court in the silence between sentences, can tell when a foreign envoy brings peace or veiled insult. Yet his education is also shaped by moments of escape, galloping along the causeway under monsoon clouds, or slipping into the night markets where storytellers paint kingdoms older than Angkor with nothing but words and hand shadow. These stories, more than any royal decree, teach him that power is as much about the mind's theater as the army's reach. The fringe belief that clings to him is one the palace does not speak aloud. The women of the kitchens say that the Naga princess who guards the city's waters has marked him, that in his presence the moat's surface stirs though no wind passes. Once, when he bends to drink from a courtyard basin, a snake with emerald eyes lifts its head from the water, uncoiling with slow grace before vanishing beneath the lilies. The sight roots itself in him, half omen, half riddle. The mystery persists. Does the court intend for this boy to inherit or to be a useful tool in someone else's ascent? No document will answer. But in the shifting glances, the withheld audiences, and the way some speak to him as if weighing the worth of each word, he senses that his life will not be decided by birth alone. He will have to carve his right into the stone of the city itself. Years pass in this dance of learning and watching. The boy grows taller, his voice deepens, and the silences around him sharpen. By the time he stands at the edge of the Elephant Terrace during a festival, watching dancers whirl before the king's seat, he understands that history will not wait for him to be ready. Somewhere beyond the walls, the world moves, and if he does not move with it, it will close over him like the floodwaters of Tonle Sap. He leaves the festival early, slipping away through a side gate. Alone under the banyans, he listens to the night insects hum like distant forges and feels the weight of a crown not yet his, a crown that may never be offered, that he may have to take. In the dark, the air tastes of iron and rain. Somewhere within, the boy makes his first decision, though no one will know for years. If destiny is a locked door, he will learn to forge the key himself. The years between boyhood and ascension are a crucible of shifting loyalties and sharpened steel. The young prince becomes a man in a court that moves like a game board where pieces vanish overnight and new ones appear with unreadable faces. Outside the palace, the empire's arteries, its roads, canals, and markets, throb with both promise and peril. Merchants bring jade from China, spices from the Malay world, and stories of armies moving in neighboring lands. To the west, the kingdom of Pagan grows restless. To the east, Champa's sails are spotted too close to the coast. A historical fact stands tall amid the uncertainty. In this period, the Khmer Empire's strength is not a constant. It swells and thins, surging during strong rule but quickly fraying when leadership falters. Borders are fluid lines, redrawn by both diplomacy and war. The man who would hold this empire must know not only how to build but how to defend and when to make the harder choice of restraint. In the markets beyond Angkor Thom's walls, the prince moves in plain cloth, watching the empire's pulse in the haggling of traders and the laughter of farmers who have made good harvest. Here, he hears rumors unfiltered by the court's politeness. A caravan leader warns of bandits swelling along the southern road. A monk from distant Luang Prabang speaks of omens in the river. Dead fish floating belly up, their silver skins flashing like coins offered to unseen gods. From the forest fringe beliefs filter back into the city. Hunters whisper of seeing the white deer again, now fully grown, its antlers hung with trailing moss that glows faintly under the moon. They say it is not bound to one place, but walks the hidden roads under the earth, visiting rulers in their dreams. Some claim the prince's recent resolve has come from such a meeting, a nocturnal audience that left him with a promise only the naga and the deer could keep. But mystery coils deeper within the palace itself. A sealed letter, carried by a trembling messenger, reaches the prince's chamber one humid evening. The handwriting is in old style, its ink smudged but its meaning clear. They will test your silence before they trust your voice. There is no signature. Days later, a minor rebellion stirs in a border province, and the council debates sending troops. The prince watches the king hesitate, weighed down by advisors whose words pull in opposite directions. He says nothing, and yet one pair of eyes in the chamber, belonging to a general of seasoned campaigns, flickers toward him as though noting his restraint. As storms turn the summer sky to hammered steel, the prince is sent on a diplomatic mission, a journey by river and road to cement an alliance with a northern tributary. Officially, it is an honor. In truth, it is also a test. His barge cuts through waters the color of green glass, passing stilt villages where children wave and fishermen pause mid-cast to stare at the royal standard. In the hills, he shares rice wine with village elders who speak more plainly than any courtier, telling him which governors they trust and which hoard grain while their people scrape for rice. He listens more than he speaks, marking every name, every grievance. One night, camped at the edge of a flooded meadow, he dreams of the Naga princess. She rises from the dark water, scales shimmering like 1,000 moonlit tiles, and speaks without moving her lips. The roads will be your veins, the rivers your breath. Keep them clear, and the heart will beat. He wakes with the taste of river salt on his tongue, and the conviction that the empire's strength lies not in its palaces, but in the threads that bind far-flung provinces to its center. The mystery of his path tightens when he returns to Angkor and finds the capital changed in subtle ways. Several key ministers are gone, replaced by younger men more eager to please the old king. A foreign envoy from Java lingers too long in the palace, his retinue whispering in corners. There is talk of a trade pact, but also of military advisors. The prince walks the galleries of the Bayon, reading the bas-reliefs not as history but as instruction. Scenes of war alongside market scenes, generals beside rice planters, a visual reminder that empire is made from both the sword and the plow. A fringe belief begins to circulate among the temple scribes, that the prince's shadow moves differently from his body, lagging a heartbeat behind, as though it listens to things his ears cannot hear. The superstitious see this as a sign he is touched by other realms, walking partly in the world of men and partly in the world of spirits. The pragmatic see it as dangerous. A man half elsewhere may not be fully loyal here. In the rainy season's last weeks, the old king falls ill. The court grows quieter, its laughter thinner. The prince is summoned more often to stand beside the throne, to read petitions aloud, to weigh in on matters that once never reached his ears. It is a dangerous closeness, for those who stand near power cast long shadows of their own, and some in the hall are not ready to see his lengthen. One evening, after a session of council, marked by sharp disagreement, the general who once watched him in silence approaches. The man's voice is low, his words deliberate. "You've walked the roads. You've seen where the empire breathes and where it chokes. Remember them. When the hour comes, you'll have less time than you think. The hour will come, though not as he imagines." For now, the prince stands on the city's walls at dawn, looking over the moat's still water, feeling the weight of all he has learned settle into him like stones into a foundation. He does not yet know whether his path will lead through a coronation or a battlefield, only that both require the same iron in the soul. The old king's illness lingers, casting a long, uncertain shadow over the empire. Courtiers begin to drift into two camps, those who move their allegiance toward the prince and those who hedge their bets, whispering other names for succession. In the gardens, where peacocks strut under frangipani trees heavy with scent, the air hums with rumors sharper than any blade. The historical truth beneath the whispers is that Khmer succession was rarely smooth. Kings often rose to the throne not purely through inheritance, but through a blend of bloodline, military strength, political maneuvering, and the favor of religious elites. A ruler might be the rightful heir by lineage, yet lose everything if he lacked the will or the network to defend it. The prince spends his days balancing presence and patience. He walks beside the king in public, showing the unity the court needs to see, yet declines to overstep in council. His restraint frustrates some supporters, but he knows that the court is watching for a single misstep to brand him as overreaching. At night, in his private chambers, he sharpens his own plans like a smith working steel, slowly, carefully, until the edge is perfect. One night, the general calls him to a secluded corner of the palace. There, between the carved columns and the shadows of guardian lions, the man reveals troubling news. A faction of nobles seeks to install a cousin of the royal bloodline, one married into Champa's elite. It would mean not only a new king, but a shift in the empire's loyalty, and perhaps its sovereignty. The prince's jaw tightens, but his voice remains calm. Then we must act before they do. Fringe belief flows through the court like an undercurrent. The high priests claim that the celestial alignment of the coming month mirrors the one seen in the reign of Jayavarman II, the founder of Angkor's might. To some, it means the empire stands on the edge of renewal. To others, it warns of upheaval, for such alignments have marked both coronations and assassinations in Khmer history. The mystery lies in how the prince will tip the balance. The general advises securing the loyalty of the city guard, whose commander is a pragmatic man, swayed more by stability than sentiment. The prince visits him under the guise of inspecting the barracks, sharing a soldier's meal, asking questions that show he understands the hardship of defending a city of Angkor's scale. The commander listens, weighing each word as though testing the metal of a blade. Beyond the walls, he orders quiet messages sent to the provincial governors who welcomed him years earlier on his diplomatic journey. Their replies are cautious but promising. They will support whoever can ensure the roads remain safe and the harvests flow to market. The prince understands. To win the throne, he must win the arteries of the empire, not merely its heart. The critical moment arrives during a ceremony at the Elephant Terrace. The king, pale and weakened, is carried in a litter to oversee a ritual meant to bless the coming planting season. The court lines the steps, the people mass below, and the smell of burning sandalwood hangs thick in the air. Midway through the rites, a storm brews on the horizon, black clouds roiling like a war host. The priests hesitate, unsure whether to continue. The king closes his eyes, exhausted. The prince steps forward. In a voice pitched to carry across the terrace, he calls for the ritual to proceed. He takes the ceremonial vessel from the high priest's hands and pours the water over the sacred plow himself, invoking blessings not only in the name of the gods, but in the name of unity and endurance. The crowd murmurs, then cheers, not because they have witnessed a coup, but because they have seen a leader act where hesitation could have broken the moment. That night, as the rain lashes against the palace eaves, the king's chief physician sends for the prince. The old man's breath rattles like dry leaves. In the dim light, he reaches for the prince's hand and speaks only 4 words: "Guard them from ruin." Hours later, the king is dead. The palace gates are sealed. Messengers fly out along the royal roads, summoning the governors and generals to Angkor. Some will arrive in loyalty, others in defiance. In the shadowed galleries of the Bayonne, the prince walks alone, feeling the stone faces above him watch with their unreadable smiles. He is no longer a child of an uncertain crown. The choice is here. The gates have opened, and whether he walks through or is crushed beneath them will be decided in days. The drums of mourning still echo through Angkor Thom, their deep, slow cadence rolling over the moat and across the rice plains like distant thunder. Black and gold banners ripple from the palace balconies, their edges frayed by the sudden rains that so often follow death in the royal line. Priests chant through the night, their voices weaving with the crackle of oil lamps, as the body of the king lies in state beneath a canopy embroidered with lotus and naga. But beneath the solemn ceremony, the machinery of power grinds into motion. The council of elders meets in hushed urgency, their faces lit by flickering candlelight as they debate succession. The prince knows the danger of this moment. In Khmer history, royal funerals have been the breeding ground of coups. The throne sits empty, and the man who fills it will shape not just the city, but the fate of a continent. A fact known to every historian. Angkor's greatness is inseparable from its mastery of water. Without the vast barrays, the reservoirs, and the spiderweb of canals feeding rice paddies, the empire would wither under the dry season's sun. The king who commands the water commands the harvest, and the harvest commands the people. The prince understands this better than most. His earliest memories are of standing on the embankments of the East Baray, watching its mirrored surface stretch to the horizon. In the days after the funeral, he makes his move, not in the council chamber but in the fields. Dressed simply, he rides out to oversee the repair of a canal gate damaged by recent storms. The farmers are startled to see him ankle-deep in mud beside them, hauling debris from the sluice. When they ask why a prince soils his hands with such work, he answers, "Because the rice will not wait for the crown." The story spreads faster than the floodwaters can drain. Fringe belief rises in the wake of his actions. Old women in the villages claim that the spirit of the water serpent, the Naga, has chosen him. They say they saw a ripple pass across the surface of the canal with no wind to stir it, and in its wake, a small snake of pure white rose from the water and slipped into the prince's shadow. Such omens are remembered, retold in temple courtyards and market stalls, and though the court scoffs, the people begin to murmur his name with reverence. The mystery deepens when a sealed chest is delivered to the palace from the northern provinces. Inside is a carved stone stele, its script half-worn but decipherable. It speaks of a ruler of the roads who will unite the lands between the two great seas. The origin of the stele is uncertain. It could be a recent carving made to bolster his claim, or it could be a relic of genuine prophecy. He keeps it hidden, knowing that in the right moment, such a symbol could sway both priest and soldier. The decisive turn comes in the council. The rival faction pushes forward the cousin with ties to Champa, arguing for the stability of an alliance through marriage. The prince listens in silence until the high priest calls for his voice. When he speaks, it is not of bloodlines or marriage pacts, but of the empire's lifelines, the roads, the rivers, the canals. If you place a man on the throne who has never walked our roads, you give our heart to foreign hands, he says, his tone steady but edged with steel. It is the general who seals the moment. Rising from his seat, he declares that the guard will stand with the prince, and that Angkor will have a king who has seen the empire not from a litter, but from the saddle and the riverboat. The words are plain, but their weight is immense. The balance shifts. The coronation takes place at dawn. As the first light touches the towers of Angkor Wat, drums and conch shells announce the new ruler. He kneels before the altar, his hands pressed together, as the high priest anoints him with water drawn from the elephant pool. From the east, the sun rises through a mist that glows like molten gold, and for a moment, it seems the whole city holds its breath. In that breath lies both promise and peril. For the throne he has taken is not merely a seat of power, it is a seat of storms, and the horizon is already darkening. The first decree of the new king is not one of conquest or taxation, but of movement. He orders the repair and extension of the great royal roads, the stone arteries that bind the Khmer Empire from the Mekong to the mountains beyond the Tonle Sap. Messengers ride out in all directions, their ponies' hooves striking sparks from the laterite paving stones as they carry the seal of the crown to every province. The historical record affirms the scope of these roads. Some were wide enough for 6 elephants to walk abreast, lined with rest houses, water basins, and way stations for royal envoys. They connected Angkor not only to its vassals, but to distant realms, Champa to the east, the Mon kingdoms to the west, and through them, the vast trade networks of India and China. A kingdom that could move faster than its rivals, could feed its cities in famine, rush soldiers to threaten borders, and carry its gods into foreign lands. But in the temples, another tale circulates, a fringe belief that these roads are more than stone and earth. The priests whisper that beneath each road lies an older path, an invisible thread woven into the skin of the land by the Naga kings before humans ruled. Travelers who walk them with the right incantations, they say, will reach their destination in a fraction of the time, as if the earth itself bends to their steps. The king does not speak of such myths, but he respects their hold on the people. When he visits the work crews, he stops to make offerings at roadside shrines, incense for the forest spirits, flowers for the serpent guardians, rice for the souls of workers who died building the old roads. His gestures carry weight. The laborers work faster, with fewer desertions, for they believe the king walks with the same unseen companions they do. Yet there is a mystery the king cannot ignore. Reports from scouts in the north tell of an ancient causeway uncovered by a landslide, one that predates Angkor by centuries. Its paving stones bear an unfamiliar script, and its alignment runs not toward any Khmer city, but toward the far reaches of the Annamite Mountains. If this road can be traced and integrated into the empire's network, it could open a new corridor for trade and military movement, or reveal a connection to a civilization lost to time. He sends his most trusted engineer, a man named Vanek, to investigate. Vanek returns weeks later, his face pale despite the tropical sun. The road, he says, is intact for miles, flanked by toppled statues of warriors whose armor resembles none known to Khmer artisans. In one segment, the paving stones are fused as if by fire hot enough to melt rock, a feat no quarryman can explain. The king orders its preservation, but for now, secrecy. He senses the potential for both danger and opportunity in what has been found. Meanwhile, his public works continue unabated. The sound of chisels and hammers becomes the heartbeat of the land. Villages along the routes swell with travelers. Merchants carry silks from the west, lacquerware from the east, and spices that perfume the air of the market squares. On the day the southern road is reopened, the king rides at the head of a grand procession. War elephants in gilded trappings walk beside cavalry with spears like a moving forest. Monks in saffron robes chant blessings. Children run alongside, scattering flowers before the king's horse. At a crossroads, he halts and addresses the gathered crowd. An empire is not stone alone. It is the path between hearts. Walk it, and you walk together. His words, simple as they are, ripple outward. In a world where distance often means division, the king has made movement itself a form of unity. And yet, as the sun sets on the newly laid stones, the wind carries the scent of rain and the faint uneasy murmur that the roads he has opened may one day bring not only allies, but armies. He chooses a center that can smile. In the cleared heart of the new city, masons lay courses of sandstone like breaths, and a tower rises upon towers until the sky begins to carry their weight. Faces open in the stone, serene, full-lipped, half-lidded, and multiply until there are dozens, then more, looking north, south, east, and west, with the patience of mountains. Drums roll like distant surf, ox carts groan under blocks, chisels flick syllables from stone. The king walks barefoot along the planks spanning scaffolds and sets a palm to the warm flank of the central tower, as if greeting a living thing. By day, the complex swarms, quarrymen with chalky forearms, sculptors coaxing eyelids from rock, gilders burnishing crowns, priests measuring shadows, engineers arguing politely with gravity. By night, torches turn the gallery reliefs into a river of moving figures, soldiers, merchants, fish, forests, the world carved and then reanimated by flame. He stands under the central spire and listens to how stone breathes when it is almost finished. Somewhere, a hammer strikes a last clean note, and the sound travels easily through the bones of the temple into his ribs. A historical fact anchors the vision. In the late 12th century, a state temple rose at the core of Angkor Thom, the Bayon, its towers bearing enigmatic faces and its galleries narrating war and market life in relief. Around the same time, Jayavarman VII consecrated great monastic complexes like Ta Prohm, 1186 CE, and Preah Khan, endowing them with vast lands, attendants, and storehouses. Inscriptions record thousands assigned to their service and name hospitals and rest houses as part of the same compassionate architecture. Temples in this reign are both theology and infrastructure. Yet in the villages, the work acquires a second grammar. People say the gods, tired by centuries of praise that always sounded like petition, have asked for a place to sleep. This temple will be their bed. Apsaras will fold their arms, guardians will lower their spears, 1,000 faces will close their eyes inwardly and dream the kingdom back into balance. If the lamps are trimmed and the drains kept clear, the gods will sleep without turning. But if neglect creeps in, the sleepers shift and earthquakes follow like sighs. He understands the need for sleep and designs for waking. The temple's plan bends orthodoxy just enough to make sense of sorrow. Shiva pillars do not vanish. Buddhist images step forward. The old linga chambers feel a new drift of incense. He accepts that mercy must be legible in stone. Porticos widen to welcome traffic. Rest platforms appear like commas where a procession can catch breath. The sanctuary does not withdraw from the city. It listens to it. In the long galleries, he asks the sculptors to copy markets as carefully as battles, fish scaled with the same attention as generals' helmets, so that when a pilgrim walks, he recognizes the world he must return to improved, not escaped. Fringe belief trails the scaffolding like a cat. A sculptor swears the stone faces blink after the third watch of the night. A nun reports that when she pressed her ear to a pillar, she heard surf, not from the Great Lake, but from another ocean the temple keeps folded inside itself. The foreman forbids night carving after an apprentice claims a tall figure stepped down from a pediment to inspect the line of a brow, and, finding it proud, pressed it gentler with a finger of unimaginable patience. Men laugh and then carve a little softer. The king watches the city approach the temple, and the temple lean gently into the city. On festival days, the avenues pour pilgrims through the gates, and the faces above receive them without judgment. On ordinary days, traders cut through the courtyards to shave a mile, their baskets swinging. In the cloisters, physicians bandage knees and dispense herbs. The hospital hall, a prayer answered before it is uttered. Justice is held under a banyan at the edge of the outer court. A child chases pigeons through colonnades and learns angles with her ankles. The sacred does not chase the practical away. It accommodates it as a body accommodates breath. Mystery nests in the smiles. Scholars will debate for centuries whether these faces are Lokesvara's compassion multiplied, or the king himself made omnipresent, mercy personified, or sovereignty surveilling, or a syncretism that insists the wound between those options is itself holy. Others will ask why the reliefs mingle war with fish sellers and wrestling and cooking. Did the carvers encode an argument that victory means nothing if markets do not resume? And why does the plan kink here, the axis slip there, the older shrine survive under newer skin? Was it haste, reverence, or a deliberate puzzle to teach visitors that straight lines alone are not salvation? He tours the temple at dusk with the engineer Vanek, whose mind count spans the way priests count mantras. They stop where a drain gapes into shadow. If we fail here, Vanek says, tapping stone above a culvert, the monsoon will take a wall, then a corner, then a doctrine. The king nods and orders a second run of corbels stacked like kind thoughts. He sends word to dig a settling pond upstream. He sends cedar oil for the lintels. He sends rice to the families whose men will pull night shifts when the first big storm walks in on elephant feet. Piety takes sand, and scheduling too. Consecration day arrives clothed in light. Processions converge, monks with saffron flaring like little dawns, dancers stepping their language into air, soldiers in lines meant to reassure rather than threaten. He climbs the central stair barefoot, pauses at each landing to touch the stone with 2 fingers. Greeting, apology, promise. In the sanctum, he bows until his forehead touches the cool floor and then raises the flame that will be the temple's first official breath. Outside, the faces shine without moving. Inside, a bell lifts a single note and the faces seem to hear it. A woman at the back of the crowd closes her eyes and sees a different temple entirely. The one that will exist when roots pour over walls and silk cotton buttresses cradle the galleries as carefully as midwives. In that far season, visitors will call it the Temple of the Sleeping Gods because the trees look like blankets and the stone like breath slowed to patience. She opens her eyes to daylight and keeps the future as a private comfort. No design worth building ends when the builder sleeps. He returns in secret after midnight. The torches are few. The moon balances her silver bowl on the central spire. He walks the inner gallery where bas-reliefs show the Cham War and the victory boat parades, then slips into the panels where cooks laugh and a cat steals fish. He feels the city breathing evenly in its sleep, canals full, granaries covered, roads drier than the dreams that once haunted them. He knows this balance is borrowed. Flood and fire and envy keep their own calendars. But for now the faces are steady, and their steadiness is a kind of treaty. Another historical thread threads the dark. At Ta Prohm and Preah Khan, inscriptions call the king a savior of the world, naming warehouses of rice, lists of dancers, inventories of bronze and silk, an imperial ledger of compassion. The language is theology. The numbers are administration. Between them walks policy, disguised as a hymn. Fringe belief kneels by the threshold with its offering. The temple guards say that if you stand beneath a certain face at dawn, the stone will take one sorrow from you and keep it for a year. At next dawn, you must return the kindness by bringing a handful of rice to the hospital pavilion. Woe given, bread given back, a covenant written in exchange rather than thunder. Mystery keeps one hand on the door even as it opens. Why, years later, will other hands recut some faces, shave noses, soften the evidence of one doctrine into another? Will the temple's smiles be considered too royal, too Buddhist, too confident? Or is revision a sign of life, stone learning to speak the language of each age that cares enough to pronounce it? He accepts that his work will be altered because it will be used. He builds for a future in which his name blurs and the rooms remain useful. Before dawn, he leaves a last instruction with Vanek. Teach the gutters to pray. The engineer smiles, understanding the joke and the command. The king steps into the first pale wash of morning and feels the temple at his back rest its innumerable faces upon the four directions. When he closes his eyes, he can almost hear them sleeping, not in neglect, but in trust, as if mercy itself had finally found a pillow. The monsoon arrives like a slow-rolling drumbeat in the distance, then swells into the roar of 1,000 waterfalls. Sky and earth merge into a single gray-green curtain. Canals swell, lotus ponds overflow, and the scent of wet laterite fills the air. In this season, the king's vision for water management is put to its first great test. Historical fact gives this moment weight. The Khmer Empire's mastery of hydraulic engineering was unrivaled in Asia. Enormous barrays, man-made reservoirs, stored millions of cubic meters of water, feeding an intricate network of canals that irrigated rice fields year-round. The East and West Baray alone could turn drought into harvest and flood into controlled abundance. In an empire where rice was both sustenance and currency, water was as much a weapon as the sword. But to the people, water is more than engineering. There is an old belief that the monsoon is the breath of the Naga, the cosmic serpent coiled beneath the land. Each year, the Naga exhales rain to bless the kingdom. If the canals run freely and the reservoirs are kept clean, the breath flows steady. But should the waterways clog or the reservoirs stagnate, the Naga's breath turns to storms, washing away crops and homes. Priests walk the embankments with incense and chant to appease the serpent, as engineers in soaked tunics haul mud from spillways. Mystery enters in the form of the Northern Canal. For weeks, villagers have reported hearing deep, resonant humming from its banks at night, even when no workers are present. Some say it's the Naga speaking through the water. Others insist it's the voice of the ancient builders whose tools were buried in the mud centuries before Angkor's rise. The sound is never recorded, never explained, only remembered. The king himself walks the embankments in the rain, accompanied by Vanek. They inspect the sluice gates, massive stone mouths that bite into the current, releasing just enough to feed the paddies without drowning them. The water must serve the land, the king says, not swallow it. His words are carried on the wind, half lost to the storm, but the laborers seem to hear them nonetheless, redoubling their efforts. At the heart of the system lies a new reservoir, smaller than the Great Barrays, but strategically placed to guard the city's northern flank. Around its edges, women wash clothes, children splash in the shallows, and fishermen cast nets that glisten with silver in the rain. The king has planted groves of tamarind and jackfruit along the dikes, knowing that shade and food will bind the people's loyalty as much as stone walls. On a particularly fierce night, when the rain hammers so hard that conversation becomes impossible, a section of the eastern canal wall begins to crumble. Vanek leads a desperate repair in the torchlight, men linking arms to brace the breach while others haul stone and sandbags. The king wades into the waist-deep water, pushing against the current with the rest. No one speaks of it in the formal records, but for generations after, the farmers along that stretch will tell their children, "The king stood in the flood beside us. When dawn comes, the storm has eased, and the canals are still flowing." From the steps of the reservoir, the king watches the surface settle, broken only by the ripples of fish. Somewhere in that stillness, he feels the Naga's breath even, the serpent content for another year. The mystery of the humming remains. Vanek suggests it might be wind-trapped in hidden stone chambers beneath the canal. A priest counters that it is the voice of the land itself, singing to the king for safeguarding its veins. The king only smiles. He knows some truths are more useful left unexplained, for mystery has its own power in binding a people to their ruler's vision. That season, the harvest is abundant beyond expectation. Granaries fill, rice is sent as tribute to allied realms, and the city celebrates with floating lanterns on the canals, each flame drifting like a star fall into the water. The king watches from the embankment, the lantern light reflecting in his eyes. In the glow, the lines between history, belief, and mystery blur, and perhaps that is the true strength of the empire, not in separating them, but in letting them flow together like the waters under his care. The roads radiating from Angkor are more than stone and dust. They are veins of the empire, carrying not only goods but also ideas, faith, and allegiance. At dawn, the king stands at the southern gate and watches caravans begin their long march. Ox carts creak under loads of rice, silk, and bronze. Horsemen ride ahead to scout the path. Monks in saffron robes walk barefoot along the margins, murmuring prayers that seem to blend with the morning mist. Historical fact gives these paths gravity. The Khmer Empire's road network was a marvel of its age, stretching hundreds of kilometers in straight lines to connect Angkor with distant provinces. Stone bridges, some still standing centuries later, spanned rivers with elegant arches. Rest houses, spaced at regular intervals, offered travelers shelter and water. These roads were strategic arteries, for in times of peace they brought trade and tribute. In times of war, they carried armies like a swift tide. Yet the people believe there is more to them than stone and mortar. Old songs speak of the sky roads, invisible paths laid by celestial architects before men walked the earth. The Khmer roads, they say, were built to mirror those heavenly routes, each turn and causeway aligned to a constellation. Travelers whisper that walking these paths at certain phases of the moon can bring visions of ancestors or glimpses of futures yet unwritten. Mystery clings to one particular road, the West Road, which vanishes into the jungle beyond the Great Lake. Even in the king's time, stories circulate about travelers who walk its length only to return, claiming they passed through villages no one has ever seen or met traders speaking languages unknown. The king sends scouts to map every league, but the further they go, the less the reports agree. Some come back with sketches of temples no one in Angkor has built. Others return silent, unwilling to say what they saw. One afternoon, the king travels the southern road himself. The heat is thick, and cicadas sing in waves. At a rest house, he sits with merchants from the coast who bring salt and pearls. They tell of new markets forming in port cities, markets that hunger for Khmer ceramics, sugar, and spices. He listens carefully, recognizing that the road is not merely for the movement of goods, but for the shaping of alliances. The more the road binds, the harder it will be for provinces to drift away. On the third day of his journey, he halts at a bridge carved with Naga balustrades. The river below is swollen from the monsoon, its surface a restless mirror. A fisherman approaches, offering a gift, a small stone wheel, weathered smooth. He claims he found it buried under the riverbank and that it belongs to the old road, the one that ran here before the Khmer ever laid their causeways. No one can say who built that road or if it was even made for men. The king accepts it, feeling its weight as if it carries the pull of time itself. That night, he dreams of walking alone along the West Road. The forest rises on either side, green walls breathing. The air is heavy with the scent of rain and something older, the smell of stone that has not seen daylight in centuries. Ahead, the road splits into two paths, one bright under the moon, the other swallowed in shadow. In the dream, he chooses the shadowed path, and the hum of distant drums begins. He wakes before he can see where it leads. Upon his return to Angkor, the king orders repairs on every road within 100 leagues and sends teams to rebuild collapsed bridges. He also commissions new milestones carved with both Khmer script and pictograms that any traveler can understand, a promise of safety and welcome. Whether they walk under the sun or the stars, he wants every traveler to know they are still within the empire's reach. The mystery of the West Road remains unsolved, but perhaps that is as it should be. A road without secrets is only a path. A road with them becomes a story. And stories, the king knows, are what bind empires long after stone begins to crumble. The jungle never truly sleeps, even under the weight of the empire. At the far edges of Khmer territory, where the royal roads dissolve into beaten earth and the river crossings rely on rafts rather than stone bridges, the trees begin their slow reclaiming. Banyan roots creep over forgotten shrines, vines descend like patient hunters. Here, the king's authority moves on whispers and the occasional shadow of a patrol passing under the green canopy. Historical fact reminds us that the Khmer Empire's borders were not fixed lines on a map, but fluid zones of influence. Beyond the core heartland of Angkor, power depended on local chieftains, sometimes loyal, sometimes opportunistic. The jungle's isolation made it both a shield and a breeding ground for dissent. Outposts had to be supplied, temples maintained, and trade routes kept alive, or these frontier lands would simply fade into other kingdoms' embrace. Yet the people who live here speak of another ruler altogether. In the deep forest, they say, dwells the Emerald King, a figure neither entirely man nor spirit. Some call him a guardian of lost temples, others a usurper king banished centuries ago who still commands a hidden court beneath the roots. Hunters claim to have seen his retinue, warriors in green lacquer armor, their eyes reflecting torchlight like a predator's. They vanish between the trees without sound. The mystery deepens when a royal patrol reports finding a road, perfectly paved, flanked by statues of mythical beasts, in a part of the jungle where no such road is recorded. It runs for only a few hundred meters before vanishing under a wall of vegetation. The statues bear inscriptions in an unknown script, their stone so weathered that even Vanek cannot guess their age. When the king hears of it, he feels the tug of something more than politics. He orders the path cleared, but within weeks the jungle swallows it again, as though it had never been touched. Determined to see the frontier for himself, the king travels upriver. The air is heavy with humidity, and dragonflies hover above the current like living jewels. Each night, his party camps under the great trees, and the sounds of the forest, gibbons, frogs, and the distant roar of waterfalls, weave into the soldier's dreams. In one village, the elders present him with a carved greenstone pendant, saying it once belonged to a king who vanished into the jungle rather than be dethroned. They urge him to wear it for protection. On the final night before his return, the king wanders from camp into a clearing lit by moonlight. There, at the far end, stands a lone figure, tall, crowned, and draped in green robes. For a moment the king feels as if he is looking into a mirror from another time. Then the figure raises a hand in silent greeting and steps back into the forest, disappearing without a sound. Whether it was man, spirit, or dream, the king never says. When he returns to Angkor, he orders supplies and craftsmen sent to the frontier, not only to strengthen defenses, but to build new temples and marketplaces. The jungle is not an enemy, he tells his court, but a kingdom waiting to be invited in. Still, he keeps the greenstone pendant close, a silent reminder that there are rulers in these lands whose thrones are older than his own, and not all of them are made of stone. The frontier remains a place of rumor and reverence. Traders carry tales of the Emerald King to the markets of Angkor, where they mingle with the king's own decrees. In the overlapping of myth and law, the jungle and the empire become inseparable. And somewhere out there, under the shade of banyan and teak, a hidden court may still gather, its ruler watching the slow dance of vines over forgotten roads. The palace at Angkor is alive with both stone and shadow. Towering corridors echo with the measured steps of guards, while courtyards shimmer in the sun, their pools reflecting the geometry of the heavens. But at the heart of this great residence lies a chamber few are permitted to enter, the Hall of Maps, where the king gathers his council to chart the fate of the realm. Historical fact grounds this scene. The Khmer court was a center of administration as much as ceremony. Scribes recorded harvest yields, merchants' routes, and temple endowments in meticulous detail on palm leaf manuscripts. Stone stele preserved royal decrees for the centuries. From here, orders radiated outward, guiding projects that reshaped landscapes, canals dug, temples raised, cities founded. Yet, beyond the ink and chisels, there is a belief among the court astrologers that every decision taken in the Hall of Maps shapes not only the land but the cosmic order. They speak of the mandala, a divine diagram of the universe mirrored in the king's realm. Each province corresponds to a celestial house, each road to a star's pathway. When the king moves a pawn on the board of politics, they say, the heavens shift in response. The mystery begins when a newly discovered scroll arrives from the eastern frontier, carried by a courier who has ridden for 6 days without rest. It contains a map, but not in the hand of Khmer scribes. The lines are faint, traced in a pigment that seems to catch light differently depending on the angle. It shows rivers that no longer exist, mountains that do not match any known range, and in the center, an immense city labeled in a script that no one in the court can read. The king studies it late into the night. Vanek wonders aloud if it is an artifact from an older civilization, perhaps a forerunner to the Khmer themselves. But an aged astrologer in the room shakes his head and insists it is not a record of the past, but a vision of the empire as it could be, or as it must be, if certain choices are made. To test its truth, the king sends 2 expeditions, one westward to a spot where the map shows a vanished river, another eastward to a plain that should, according to the chart, hold a great lake. Weeks later, the westward team reports finding a dry channel, its banks lined with stones carved in styles unknown to Khmer art. The eastward party finds only scrubland, but the soil is wet and rich, as if a lake truly once lay there. Intrigued, the king orders new roads planned along these invisible lines, their courses following the strange geometry of the map. His advisors protest. Why divert resources for paths that lead to nothing? But he waves them silent. Sometimes, he says, a road must be built before there's a reason to travel it. That season, construction begins quietly, with only a select group knowing the true design. Workers carve foundation stones, inscribed not only with dates and royal names, but with symbols lifted from the unknown script, copied faithfully, though none understand their meaning. As the months pass, merchants and settlers begin to use the new roads simply because they exist, and soon the king's map is no longer just a vision, it is shaping reality. The scroll remains in the Hall of Maps, guarded under silk and cedar. Some nights the king studies it by the light of oil lamps, his finger tracing its impossible lines, wondering if he is following an ancient plan or walking into a prophecy. Either way, the map's hold on him is unbroken, and in the silence between meetings, the Hall of Maps feels less like a chamber of stone and more like a doorway, one that may open not to another room, but to another age. The rains have returned, and with them, the lifeblood of the empire flows again. Rivers swell, reservoirs brim, and the great barrays, those vast artificial lakes carved into the earth by the hands of thousands, glisten under the monsoon's silver light. The king stands upon the causeway of the East Baray, the wind carrying the scent of wet lotus and earth. Historical fact makes clear the genius of the Khmer hydraulic system. These massive reservoirs were feats of engineering, collecting and storing water during the rainy season, then releasing it in careful measure to irrigate rice fields throughout the dry months. The control of water was the control of life itself and the foundation of the empire's prosperity. Yet the priests whisper that water is more than sustenance. It is the living breath of the Naga, the serpent that bridges the human world and the divine. They believe the reservoirs are not merely practical, but sacred mirrors of the cosmic ocean, ensuring that the king's mandate flows as steadily as the canals. When the water turns stagnant or runs dry, they say, it is a sign that the Naga stirs in unrest. A mystery now rises from the depths. Fishermen have begun returning with stories of carved stones appearing at the base of the East Bareilles southern wall, stones unlike any others in Angkor. They bear swirling patterns, almost like waves frozen in motion, and faint figures of serpents whose eyes seem to follow the onlooker. Vanek examines one pulled from the mud and frowns. The style is older, rougher, yet somehow more deliberate than Khmer hands would make. The king orders divers to search the waters. For days they bring up fragments, some no larger than a hand, others as big as a man's chest, until at last they find what appears to be the curved prow of a boat, carved entirely from stone. Its hull is decorated with reliefs of warriors holding lotus spears, their faces worn but still fierce. No one can say how it came to rest at the bottom of the Bareilles, nor whether it was meant to sail on water or through the currents of myth. One night, during a violent storm, the king walks alone to the reservoir's edge. Lightning splits the sky, and in the momentary glare, he swears he sees movement in the water, a great sinuous shape slipping just beneath the surface. The ripples spread outward in perfect circles until they vanish into the dark. The next day, he summons engineers and orders the strengthening of the Bareilles walls, the dredging of its channels, and the planting of new lotus gardens to honor the Naga. We hold the waters, he says, but the waters also hold us. His words carry both command and caution. The work is done swiftly, and that season the rice harvest is rich beyond measure. The people take it as a sign of the Naga's blessing, and offerings of flowers, incense, and polished conch shells appear along the water's edge. But the king keeps the stone prow in his private chambers, its silent warriors staring outward as if watching for a tide that will one day return. Some claim the boat was built for a journey not of rivers, but of time. Others believe it waits for the day the Naga will rise again, carrying the empire on its back through waters no mortal map can chart. Whether relic or omen, it remains, an unanswered question lying just below the surface, like the deep stillness before the next flood. In the outer courtyards of Angkor Thom, the air hums with the clink of chisels and the murmur of stonecutters at work. Long walls of sandstone stretch toward the horizon, their faces coming alive with scenes of elephants in procession, warriors in chariots, and dancers mid-step, forever caught in a carved rhythm. These are the empire's storytellers, artisans who speak through stone. Historical fact tells us that bas-reliefs in Angkor served more than decoration. They were chronicles of the kingdom, blending historical events with religious and mythological narratives. Through them, the deeds of kings were preserved, victories immortalized, and cosmic truth set in stone for all to see. Yet among the fresh carvings, a rumor stirs. Some panels depict not events from the king's reign, but scenes that none can recognize, battles in strange landscapes, processions toward cities of impossible architecture, and ships with prows shaped like the heads of birds. The artisans claim these images come from the king's direct orders, based on visions he received in dreams. He had described them in such detail that the sculptors could not mistake a line or curve. The mystery deepens when Vanek notices a repeating figure across several unrelated panels. A tall, robed man whose face is hidden under a wide hood, standing at the threshold between light and shadow. Sometimes he watches a battle from afar, sometimes he walks among dancers or traders, sometimes he stands at the prow of a ship headed into uncharted seas. No inscription names him, and no one dares ask the king who he is meant to be. One afternoon, as the sun turns the sandstone golden, the king himself walks the line of new carvings. He stops before one, where the hooded figure stands at a city gate, hand raised as if in blessing or warning. The king traces the grooves with his fingers, his expression unreadable. Then he instructs the artisans to expand the scene, to carve the road beyond the gate, leading into the jungle, but to leave its destination unfinished. The work continues, and soon visitors to the courtyard begin to notice something uncanny. No matter where one stands, the hooded figure seems to face them directly. Even the soldiers who patrol at night say they feel his gaze following them, though the moonlight casts no shadows in the stone. When asked about the unfinished road, the chief artisan shrugs. The king said the road must remain open, he explains, for one day its end will reveal itself. No one knows whether he means in stone or in the world beyond. Over the months, pilgrims and traders passing through Angkor Thom paused to study these panels, carrying their impressions back to their own lands. In distant markets, whispers grow of a Khmer king who commands not only armies and masons, but dreams themselves. The hooded figure becomes a piece of traveling folklore, a guardian, a prophet, or a wanderer between worlds, depending on who tells the story. And in the quiet hours before dawn, the king returns to the courtyard alone. Standing before the unfinished road, he gazes into its blank stone as though trying to see what lies beyond. Perhaps he sees nothing. Perhaps he sees everything. The relief does not answer, only waits. The dry season lays a golden haze over the empire. Dust drifts through the streets of Angkor as merchants call out their wares, silks from Champa, spices from Java, ivory from the Mekong's upper reaches. The city feels like the beating heart of a world that stretches far beyond its walls. Historical fact speaks of the Khmer Empire as a nexus of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange during its height. Chinese envoys recorded its bustling markets, while merchants from as far as India and the Malay archipelago moved goods along its roads and waterways. Tribute and commerce flowed hand in hand, enriching the capital and extending its influence across Asia. Yet, in the shadowed halls of the palace, the king pursues a more subtle mission. Envoys return from foreign courts with objects not found in any market, fragments of jade inlaid with gold script from the north, polished obsidian mirrors from the islands, bronze bells whose tone lingers unnaturally long. Some bear marks of civilizations thought lost to time. The king examines them one by one, then orders them placed in a sealed chamber known only to a handful of his closest advisors. The mystery around this chamber deepens when a foreign scholar, traveling under royal invitation, is allowed a brief audience with the collection. Emerging pale and trembling, he refuses to speak of what he saw, saying only, "The walls were not walls." He leaves Angkor the next morning without accepting payment, vanishing along the western road. Meanwhile, traders in the marketplace tell of a strange caravan that arrived at night and departed before dawn, its carts covered in black silk, guarded by soldiers who bore no insignia. No one knows from where it came or where it went, but some swear they saw a faint light flickering beneath the silken covers, like moonlight trapped in glass. In council, Vanek presses the king to reveal the purpose of these acquisitions. The king only smiles. "Every empire leaves behind its bones," he says. "I am gathering the marrow." His words unsettle even the most loyal ministers, for they carry the weight of a design larger than politics or trade. The sealed chamber becomes a subject of hushed speculation among the palace staff. Some claim it holds relics capable of commanding the elements. Others believe it is a library of objects that speak when the moon is full. A few whisper that it is not a room at all, but a doorway, one that opens not into another space, but another time. One evening, when the torches burn low, the king walks alone to the chamber. Unlocking the heavy bronze doors, he steps inside, and for a moment the corridors outside seem to grow distant, as though the world itself is receding. From the courtyard, a guard hears a faint hum, like the resonance of a bell struck somewhere far below the earth. Then, silence. When the king emerges, his face is calm, but his eyes carry the glint of a man who has seen the shape of something vast. That night, he calls for new diplomatic envoys, not to nearby kingdoms, but to distant lands whose names have not been spoken in Angkor for generations. Whatever lies in that sealed chamber, it is not merely a collection. It is a map of influence, drawn not in ink or stone, but in the hidden threads that bind worlds together. And the king, forgotten by history's pages, seems intent on pulling those threads until the weave of Asia itself begins to change. The sun dips low over Angkor, its last light spilling gold and crimson across the moats and towers. The city hums with the slow rhythm of evening, vendors packing away their wares, temple bells marking the hour, and the faint scent of incense drifting through the streets. Yet tonight, an unspoken stillness lies beneath it all, as if the air itself is pausing to listen. Beyond the palace, the great causeways stretch toward the jungle, their stones warm from the day's heat. Birds wheel overhead before settling into the banyan trees, whose roots clutch the earth like ancient hands. The king walks here alone, his shadow lengthening, his mind tracing the roads he has built, the wars he has fought, the alliances he has sealed in both word and silence. Historical fact will one day note his reign in fragments. A road here, a restored temple there, a trade route quietly shifting across the map. But it will not record the depth of his vision, nor the way he wove the empire into a tapestry that reached beyond borders, beyond oceans, perhaps even beyond the grasp of time itself. Among the people, the myths have already begun. They tell of a ruler who could summon rain with a gesture, who walked roads that vanished behind him, whose eyes saw the meeting of two suns at the world's edge. In distant ports, sailors speak of a Khmer king who traded in objects no one could name, whose emissaries knew the language of rivers and winds. The mystery of his sealed chamber remains. Some say it was emptied before his death, its contents scattered across Asia, hidden in temples, caves, and beneath palace floors. Others believe it still lies locked beneath Angkor, waiting for the one who can open it without shattering the balance it holds. The king's passing is marked not by grand ceremony, but by a quiet procession through the city's heart. No trumpets, no declarations, only the steady beat of drums and the low murmur of prayers. Yet those who line the streets feel the weight of the moment, as if a pillar of the world has been removed. Centuries will pass. The jungle will claim the roads, the temples, the moats. The king's name will fade from the chronicles, leaving only hints and echoes. But his influence will live on, in the pattern of trade winds, in the shared motifs of distant temples, in the whispered tales of travelers who see the same hooded figure carved in stone thousands of miles apart. And so his story becomes less history than current, moving unseen beneath the surface of nations. Like the great Naga beneath the waters, it coils through time, surfacing only when the world is ready to see it again. Tonight, in the quiet after sunset, Angkor's towers stand dark against the sky. A breeze stirs the lotus leaves in the moat. Somewhere deep in the ruins, a single door groans softly on its hinges, though no one is there to open it. The air tastes of rain. The echoes rise. The forgotten throne speaks once more.